Sometimes we can be so desperate for a miracle that we miss the one right in front of us. Now on the Accessible Faith Project. Hi there, I'm John and welcome to the Accessible Faith Project. If you're new here and looking for insights into the Bible, faith, and history in ways that engage your brain, then please hit subscribe and that little bell icon so you can receive a notification every time I upload a new video. As we continue social distancing, I've been using the Accessible Faith Project to provide worship and devotional resources in addition to my educational videos. This one is a sermon, but as with most of my offerings, learning a little bit of history and context goes a long way in helping us to understand it all. In this season of Epiphany, if I could sum up my preaching theme with one sentence, it would be, where have you seen or experienced God? Even when I asked the question a few weeks ago, what does God's voice sound like? It is merely a variation on that theme. It's a core question for our spirituality, and we aren't that good at thinking about it, never mind talking about it. Not only that, I think we've somehow removed ourselves from the stories of the Bible, in that these are events or stories that happened way back then, and stuff like that doesn't happen to ordinary everyday folk like us. After all, aren't miracles supposed to be significant, grand, spectacular events? After all, they are described as the instant dissipation of a storm at the wave of a hand, a stampede of pigs, or a column of light shining down from heaven showing us the way. We have come to expect these things. We are expecting a spectacle, but we miss the authentic miracles that happen to us in everyday life. So here's an example. How many of you are breathing right now? If you had to take a moment to think about that, and if you're watching this, I'm pretty sure you're breathing, and if you're not, you should have already had someone call an ambulance and you shouldn't be watching this video. We can get into the details of the biological processes of breathing, how it transfers oxygen from the air into your blood and provides you with more than 90% of your energy requirements as a human being. There have been scientific observations about how it happens, how it developed through time in life on Earth. We actually know how it works. But here's the question. Does knowing how we convert the energy out of the air into something that sustains our life any less of a miracle? Of course not. So that begs the question, what does a miracle look or feel like? It's the same sort of question as what does God's voice sound like that I asked a few weeks ago. Think about that when we listen to the tale of Naaman. The story from 2 Kings today is a story of contrast. It pits the big and the mighty against the downright common. It is a reminder that while we are attracted by the big and the spectacular, God often works in very ordinary circumstances, and we miss the real miracle. The story of Naaman, the leper general, is one of contrast, and it teaches us so much. It's a great story, but not one that we get a chance to hear all that often. Naaman is a man of outstanding accomplishments. He has amassed considerable wealth and fame. He has everything one might expect of a victorious general, except for one thing. He suffers from a disfiguring disease. The story of 2 Kings takes a tangent to tell this foreigner's story about healing in the most unexpected of places. As the story goes, Naaman is a general from the kingdom of Aram. If you were to look at an ancient map of the area around Israel, Aram is the land that is now the western part of Syria that includes Damascus. And he is a great military leader, receiving the highest compliment given to an outsider. As the storyteller tells us, the Lord had given him victory. All in the opening credits, Naaman had everything going for him, except for one thing. He was a leper, afflicted with a disfiguring disease that would leave him as an outcast under any other circumstances. His accomplishments in life are so successful that he can maintain his station, but he walks a very fine line. One slip up, one failure, and there would be no chance for redemption, and he would face exile for the rest of his natural life. During one of Naaman's many successful raids, one of his captives is a young Hebrew girl who is put to work in the general's entourage with Naaman's wife. And to entertain the people that she now serves, the girl tells of these wondrous stories of a great prophet in Samaria who is known for working miracles. Eventually, the news reaches Naaman's ears. Desperate for his own miracle, Naaman decides to go to his king in Damascus and asks him for leave to travel to Israel to search for this great prophet. Not only does the king think that this is a good idea, he gives him the royal treatment. He provides a full diplomatic letter and a king's ransom along with it, only the best for his favored general. Naaman's voyage is not a private trip. This is the full entourage: horses, chariots, and piles of money. The story says that he brings 10 talents of silver, 10,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of garments. It is a colossal gift to the king of Israel, provided, of course, that he can supply this miracle. In modern terms, they were carting around some $30 million in cash. And with all of this, Naaman sets out on his trip to find this great prophet. But not knowing where to look, of course, the first place he goes is to pay a visit to the king of Israel. Now keep in mind, how might this look politically? If you were living in this time and a general from a neighboring rival kingdom shows up on the doorstep with a full military escort, how might you interpret it? The letter that Naaman carries is diplomatic, but the basic message is still the same. It is a powerful king commanding a weaker neighbor to heal my servant. The king of Israel, of course, is not dumb. He reads between the lines and sees a conspiracy. He assumes the Arameans are spoiling for a fight, and the king of Aram is just looking for any excuse. Not only that, how utterly convenient it is for Aram's greatest general to come in and to scout out all of the defenses in person. To the king of Israel, it's a spying and intelligence gathering trip. Yet there's nothing, absolutely nothing, that he can do about it. He doesn't know or doesn't believe that Naaman's visit is a legitimate one. Instead, he begins a loud and very public lament that war with the Arameans is imminent. He symbolically tears his clothes, a very drastic demonstration of mourning. Eventually, though, someone from the camp of the prophet Elisha hears about the king's complaining. Elisha sends a message to the king and tells him to quit his whining and to send Naaman to him. And eager to get this brooding leper general off of his doorstep, the king readily agrees. Perhaps he even secretly hopes that Naaman will get mad at the prophet and kill him so that the king doesn't have to deal with Elisha as a thorn in his own side. Up until this point, this has all been about a big flash, a big show. Large entourages, opulent wealth, great parades. It's all big and spectacular. Naaman takes it all out into the wilderness and goes out to Elisha's encampment. And suddenly, those gears shift very, very quickly. Elisha's home is a far cry from the king's palace. Naaman's whole entourage seemed wholly out of place. And Naaman comes to Elisha's house, arriving with all of the great pomp and circumstances worthy of a king. And Naaman is all prepared for this moment. And finally, we're getting somewhere, he thinks. He arrives before the house of the prophet, and the trumpets blare, announcing Naaman's presence, and with great anticipation, all eyes turn to the house door. And after a great pause, Elijah's servant comes out of the house and tells Naaman to wash in the Jordan 7 times. Elisha himself doesn't even come outside to meet with the general. I mean, seriously, how impressed would you be if you went to all this trouble to see someone who would heal you, and the receptionist at the front desk tells you to go and take a bath? I didn't think so. Needless to say, Naaman is not impressed. He's in fact quite angry. All of this pent-up expectations come out. He says out loud what most of us have probably come to expect. He wanted Elisha to come out of his hut with some grand fashion, wave his hand over the spot while incanting some oaths of magic words, doing something at least to look like he was doing something. But instead, it's a servant. A servant comes out of the house and says, "Go have a bath." More specifically, he tells him to have a bath in the Jordan River. Now, Naaman, in his anger, rants about the rivers of Damascus being much nicer than the Jordan. And he's not kidding. The Jordan River is not that spectacular. It's actually pretty unremarkable. So when Elisha, through a servant, tells him to have a bath in its murky waters, Naaman is just a little bit put out. Fortunately, in the middle of his rant, one of Naaman's servants speaks up and interrupts him. He says, boss, don't take this the wrong way, but if he said to you to do something hard like climbing the highest mountain or traveling to the ends of the earth, would you not have done that? All he's saying to you is to go over there and wash in the river 7 times. I mean, what have you got to lose? Give it a try. Naaman's servant had a point. In other stories and cultures, we have these legends of heroes, say, for example, like Hercules, who has to accomplish 12 impossible tasks. All Naaman has to do here is to go down to the river and wash 7 times. And so he went down to the Jordan and he bathed in it the times that he was told to take. And what do you know? It worked. Naaman is healed. Now, suppose for a minute that Naaman had not listened to his servants. Suppose for a minute that he had gone off in a huff because he had expected Elisha to come out and to do something spectacular and was disappointed that he didn't. Suppose for a minute that Naaman had ignored the advice of all of those small voices telling him to pay attention to something that would otherwise be common or ordinary. Naaman would have missed it. He would not have been healed, and there would be no story to tell at all. So this comes all the way back to that question. What does a miracle look or feel like? What miracles have we missed because we are expecting something different? We tend to miss the miracle in the mundane. Instead, we look for God in the grand and the spectacular, not paying attention to those little common things that we have too often taken for granted. The story of Naaman is a story of contrasts, showing how the mighty and the powerful become healed through things very plain and ordinary. We cannot be so preoccupied for looking for what we might expect because we might miss the genuine miracle that is right in front of us. The real lesson here is how positively ordinary God's grace can be, how we can miss miracles by not paying attention to the everyday things in life. If we expect the big show like Naaman, we may be in danger of missing the real miracle when it comes. Our most remarkable epiphany moments come when we see something ordinary, something that we take for granted in a new light or a new way. Our challenge is to try to listen to the small voices, the unexpected ones, like servants, those people, or instances that seem so insignificant that it seems hardly worthwhile to give it a thought. Our challenge is to try to appreciate the common miracles that we experience every day. So think about this. What does a miracle look like or feel like? Open your eyes, open your heart. You might be surprised. Amen.